Hi, Ania here. In today's video, I'm going to bring the spotlight on the pose called VASISTHASANA-Side Plank. Side plank is a strengthening, balancing, and transitional pose. We're going to learn how to understand this pose to make it a little bit stronger, more beneficial, and more effortless and graceful. But at the same time, we're going to be playing with different variation of the pose, modifications, and also transitions. So whenever you're ready, unroll the mat and join me. Okay, so let's start with the hand positioning. So the fingers are spreading wide enough so you can bring the cushion of each finger down to the floor. Press the knuckles down, press the palm down, and the most essential finger in here is going to be the thumb because you're pressing the thumb a bit harder to the floor to protect the inner wrist from carrying the weight. The cushions of the fingers are very essential to pressing down, so you're kind of crunching your fingers a little bit to redirect the weight between the fingers, between the cushions, between the knuckles, palm, and obviously the full extension of the thumb. Don't try to overspread your fingers because if you're overspreading the fingers, as you can see, the fingers are going to come off the floor and the weight is not going to be moving into the cushions. It's going to be moving towards knuckle, palm, and it may actually go to the top point of the wrist. We want to avoid that, especially if your wrists are not really fully open or stretched. You don't have good flexion in this joint, so try to use that crunching of the fingers. It's going to protect the wrist, the top of the wrist. Please do never do this. I see it sometimes and it just drives me nuts because this is like the most damaging thing you can do, not just to your wrist, but also to the elbow and to the shoulder. It's like the most damaging thing for all the joints that rub from the wrist, elbow, shoulder, and then eventually you may feel like a nervous spasm going up the neck. It's just painful and it's just so wrong. Okay, so from here, the hand's gonna go down to the floor depending on the length of your arm. So if your arm is as long as mine, you're gonna try to slide that hand a little more forward. The reason we're doing so is to make sure that we're looking for the length in the side of the neck. We don't want to contract in the neck. We want to look for a nice long extension in the neck, through the pec muscles, and from the pec all the way to the side muscles, those obliques, and all those muscles that wrapping around your trunk. So if your arm is long, extend the hand, bring the hand further forward. If the arm is a little bit shorter, obviously the hand is going to go closer towards the hip. It's really up to you. You have to figure out which way works best for you. Obviously, you want to do it the most beneficial way for your shoulder, for the elbow, for the wrist. Those of you guys who have tendencies of rolling your shoulders in, of maybe collapsing in your chest, in your collarbones, maybe you're spending lots of time in front of computer, or you working a lot with the weights, which causes kind of rounding in the upper part of the spine. So for that reason, I highly recommend for you to spread the fingers slightly out, which means the fingers going to be facing to the outside, the thumb may face a little bit more forward to the top of the mat. That's going to give you outer rotation in the shoulder. It doesn't mean it's going to be going into your rotator cuff. You may have to focus on using your pec muscles much more in here. The pec muscles are pretty strong muscles, so it's actually pretty beneficial to do so for those of you guys who have the tendency of collapsing and using too much of the part of the cervical and thoracic area. So you want to make sure that you have a little bit of chest opening in here. As a matter of fact, in side planks and in planks themselves, we're looking for a little bit of cobra motion, like a baby cobra motion, where you're relaxing your shoulders and you just have a little bit of stretch, lifting the sternum up. Let's go further with the trunk. So I'm going to go sideways, you can see me better. So shoulders obviously are relaxed. We want to understand this pose as a leveraging pose. So the hand is going down to the floor, fingers are pressing down to give you a little bit of lift. We're not collapsing into the shoulder, we're lifting the shoulder. This is the reason why I don't like this pose to be misinterpreted or miscalled arm balance. This is not arm balance. The only time this pose would be an arm balance is if you're lifting the feet and hover them above the floor. In this case, I think it would be called peacock or side peacock, and that's just totally different pose. The other reason why I don't like to call this pose arm balance is because if we think about pose as an arm balance, we for some reason trying to bring all the attention into the hand, into the shoulder, into that hand, that arm of that it's supporting this pose. I want your mind to be moved away, energy shifting away from that leveraging arm, because the actual strength, actual work of in this pose is happening in the trunk and in the leg muscles. So let's focus on the trunk now. Shoulders are relaxed, and we're gonna lift the sternum up. So this is the baby cobra motion that we're looking for. Now, as the sternum is lifting up, for some of us, there is a tendency of swaying that back. That back has to be strengthening and stretching down. So the tailbone is gonna be actually rooting down. We're not gonna be tucking the tailbone under, we're rooting the tailbone down to activate those lower back muscles, the QL muscles, and those muscles incorporated with the muscles wrapping around our trunk, the obliques, all those rhomboid muscles around that, and the layers of the six-pack, the stomach muscles, are the muscles that actually stabilize and hold this pose in. Those muscles are going to be the muscles that are going to be working the hardest in here. So, and obviously the pec and the intercostals. So all the strength, all the power in this pose is going to actually go from the core. And the core in this case, as in any case, is not just the front of the stomach, it's the, again, muscles wrapping around and those lower back muscles being active. If those muscles are not active, which is that sway motion, there's lots of contractions happening, and you're actually putting kind of like a pressure on the spine. So you want to make sure that those muscles are pretty strong and active. Now, tucking the tailbone down. Let me lift the hips for a second. So the tailbone is tucking down, that's going to automatically engage your glutes. And it doesn't mean that your glutes are squeezing in towards each other, so you're not tightening your butt in. You actually kind of like contracting the top and the bottom of the glutes into the center. So this is more kind of like a horizontal squeeze. What this does is not going to just engage the glutes, but it's also going to activate those lower back muscles, allows those stomach muscles to suck in, repositioning the pelvis into neutral position, at the same time activate your hamstrings. And hamstrings are obviously pretty important in this pose. Okay, let's go into the legs. The legs are pretty essential here. So the most essential thing about the leg is to make sure that the foot is flexed. So we're not pointing the toes in here, we're actually flexing it. And as I'm flexing the foot, the weight is actually moving towards the heel. The other thing about this pose is that I don't want to go into the arch. I'm actually going to work with rotating the foot out. So I want to bring the sole of the foot down to the floor. So the bottom foot is going to be working very hard to get the sole of the foot down. This is essential because you really want to activate this bottom leg. The bottom leg and the, as I mentioned, trunk muscles are going to be holding this pose, especially when you start going into transitions. We know that side plank is transitional pose. So we're going to move forward, we're going to move backwards, but all this stability and balance is actually going to go from that bottom leg. So let's try it. You're going to bring the hand in any variation possible. So whatever works best for you, just make sure that the shoulder is not ahead of the wrist. And then we're going to try to go into the full extension of the pose. Let's just work on that bottom leg first. So we're going to try to bring that foot down to the floor. As you can see, as I'm bringing the sole of the foot down, the hip wants to lift a bit higher. Now, I'm not just going to stay here and contract into those side muscles. I'm actually going to elongate. So I want to make sure that those muscles are getting nicely stretched and worked, because they're going to be actually protecting my shoulder from carrying too much weight. As soon as I'm contracting in here, the weight may go into the shoulder and wrist. As I'm elongating in here, those muscles are carrying most of the weight. My lower abdominal muscles are working pretty hard here. My tailbone is tucking, so I'm not swaying in the back. And then at the same time, I want to extend obviously my neck, so I'm not contracting in my cervical. And then on in this, we're now just gonna bring the top leg on top. And again, we're gonna just look for the extension. We're gonna tap into the sternum, so we're gonna find it more length in the torso. We wanna also make sure that that extension comes from frontal ribs moving up, away from the hips. Hips are shifting down, so there's lots of active motion in the upper thighs. And I'm pretty solid in here, making sure that every muscle of my trunk and my leg is working harder than the wrist, those fingers, that elbow, and a nice soft shoulder. Okay, so let's play with modification of this pose now. So the first modification is going to be for those of you guys who are still not feeling comfortable with this pose. So we're going to bring the hand down to the floor. We're going to bring both knees down, and we're going to make sure that the feet are spinning backwards. So the bottom leg is going to be my right knee, my right hand is forward, and I'm going to start extending my top leg, and I'm going to flex it. I want to make sure the foot again is not going on the arch, it's going to spin fully flat, because that's pretty much what's going to be my side plank. I'm again going to look for the extension in the torso. Please do not collapse in here. Contraction, those muscles just make them a bit more passive, whereas overstretching the top, we are actually looking for extension in the both sides of the trunk. So this is more important than is this leg gonna be straight, is the foot gonna be pressing down. You want to really make sure that the trunk is really nicely level. Okay, so the first variation is for those of you guys who are still struggling with this pose. So I'm gonna try to make it as easy for you as I can. Let's slide the hand down to the floor. Again, just make sure that the hand is far away enough so you can get the space in the trunk to elongate. And we're gonna start with the 1 foot, knee pressing down to the floor, shin pressing down, toes pressing down to the floor. The top leg obviously is going to be extended. This is like a very soft variation of the side plank. We want to make sure that we're not bringing too much weight into the knee, so we're going to press the shin and the face of the foot down to the floor. The toes of the bottom foot are going to be really pressing down to the floor, so you're going to have more stability from the shin and from the foot than from the knee itself. We also want to make sure that the hips are a little more forward. There's a tendency for us to, when we go into the bottom hip, to slightly collapse down. So we want to make sure that the hip is leaning forward. So we, again, looking for that baby cobra action, shoulders relaxed. And again, we're looking for the length in the obliques in the side of the torso, and then just flexion of the top foot, pressing the foot flat down. The variation of the hand can go up. Extension of the arm forward allows us to elongate both sides of the torso a bit more. If you want to extra, you can bring the hand behind the neck and just kind of spin the chin towards the top shoulder to the side or down. Just always make sure that as the shoulder goes, chin and shoulders going towards each other, you're still going to look for the extension of the neck in here. So never try to collapse with the head down. Never try to go with the nose forward and look towards the back foot, because that's right away is going to wrap, it's going to affect your upper trapezes, and you don't want it. You want to look for that nice extension, nice gracefulness of the happy baby, oh actually I'm sorry, baby cobra in here. So this variation is pretty similar. We're going to bring the knee on the floor, we're going to bring the foot down, we're just going to spin the foot going to the side. So instead of foot pointing back to the back of the mat, the foot's going to go sideways, and we're just going to push the hip of that foot, of that leg, away from the torso. Again, we're looking for that extension. If you need to, you have to adjust the hand a little bit more forward, just making sure that you don't contract in those muscles. Again, the back foot, the top leg is going to be extended, the foot is going to press down to the floor. You're trying to get more stretch by pressing the outside edge of that top foot. And then from here, you're just looking for baby cobra, check the lower back. Sometimes we forget about the lower back, about the contraction that, so once in a while you can just check if the tailbone is tucking away towards the heel and there's length and stretch going on in the lower back. So that's the second modification. This modification, or more like variation of Vasisthasana, is probably the most common, the most familiar. So let's just jump to it. We're gonna extend one leg, we're gonna extend the other leg, we're gonna squeeze the inner thighs, and we're just gonna press the inner arches of the feet towards each other. In this case, we're not gonna try to press the sole of the foot down to the floor. We're just gonna engage the inner thighs towards each other. If this is difficult, you can squeeze the block in between or heavy book, but make sure that as you're squeezing the block, you're not rolling the tailbone up. The tailbone constantly wants to roll towards the heels. There's lots of flexion in the heels, lots of engagement in the feet, and at the same time, you obviously want to make sure that your hamstrings are pretty active, which means the heels are constantly trying to move away, stretch away from the sit bones, from the glutes. In this pose also, you want to make sure that the chin is either in or forward. You don't want to look back. And at the same time, you want to make sure that the top hip is not rolling too much out and you're not collapsing in the bottom hip, so that top foot is constantly moving forward and in. You may actually press the toes of the top foot, the big toe of the top foot, a little bit deeper towards the bottom, so you can even lift the heel of the right foot a little bit higher up to make sure that the top hip is not collapsing down. So that's another modification. Now, when stacking your feet together or even pressing the inner arches towards each other and stabilizing the pose, it's not easy for you. There is so many different variations of doing this pose. I'm gonna show you another variation of playing with this pose and just kind of finding it strong and balancing and graceful. So if stacking the feet again is just not comfortable, you just bring the top foot a bit more forward. This way, you're gonna try to press both feet, soles of your feet down to the floor, and you wanna try to lift the hips up again. Don't try to contract in those bottom muscles. It's just not really beneficial, right? Now, when going into side plank with the feet stacked together, one on top of another, is still not the most comfortable for you. There are so many other variations. So I'm gonna show you even more modifications of side plank. So one of them is bringing the bottom foot, obviously the soles of the foot presses down, and instead of stacking the top foot on top, you can just bring the foot forward. This way you want to actually shift away into the hips, into the legs, and the legs are working very hard because you actually want to bring the soles of your feet down. So both feet are going to be rolling into the soles. Extend the chest forward. Nice big inhale in here. This is actually a pretty good way of spinning the feet down and going into down facing dog if you feel like side plank it's too challenging. And then from here you can just spin obviously into the other side, doing the same thing, bringing the feet, the soles of your feet, pressing the soles of your feet down, and looking for side plank on the other side. Again, bringing the hands down and shifting to down facing dog. The other variation is that you can bring the top leg instead of forward, backwards. What this is gonna allow is to kind of give you a little more opening in the hip, and it's also gonna help you to spin the top hip a little bit more and try to stretch the IT bend of the top leg a little bit more. Obviously, both feet trying to go into full soles of the feet down to the mat. That's from both sides. So again, I'm gonna go to the top foot going backwards. So you can see from every single angle. Obviously the top foot can go freely down, fully down to the floor. The bottom foot may have some challenges of coming all flat, but we're still trying to work on it at the same time, remembering the extension of the torso. And again, we can find our way to down facing dog. Another common modifications of the side plank is where the top foot is actually on the floor and it's sideways. So the foot is probably facing to the edge of the mat. So it's very easy to come from here when the foot is already there, knees bent. I'm gonna bring the hand down to the floor and I'm just gonna straighten the right leg behind the left one. So this is kind of like a supportive side plank. It makes it easy for us to kind of control the hips. We want to make sure that we're not collapsing in the bottom hip unless you want to go into like a full stretch, but obviously at this point it's not a side plank. And if you go into side plank, make sure that the top hip is spinning slightly back, and obviously all the alignment that I mentioned before. So let's try the other side. We're gonna extend the other leg behind. You can tippy-toe the front foot, the top leg, a little bit more forward. You can walk it backwards. So it's pretty easy to control this variation of the side plank. Obviously making sure that hips are stuck and squeezed. So lots of engagement in the glutes in here. This is a very good one when you're learning to eventually transition from side plank forward. We're gonna be working on it in just a second. Just let's play with the modification variation of the pose first. So this last modification of the VASISTHASANA is probably not as common, but I do like to use it when I teach unbalancing pose called Ashtavakrasana. So this side plank variation allows us to understand the arm balance that requires lots of engagement of the inner thighs, inner shins, and squeeze of the ankles. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna bring the bottom leg obviously pretty flexed down to the floor, and I'm gonna cross the top ankle in front. Now in this case, my top leg is gonna be on the floor. I'm gonna start lifting my bottom ankle, bottom foot of the floor. So my right leg is the leg on the bottom, so the right foot is gonna come off the floor. I'm gonna lock that right ankle behind the left one, and that top the foot of the top leg is actually pressing fully flat on the ground. We're gonna squeeze the ankles in, we're gonna engage the shins, we're gonna engage the inner thighs, we're gonna look for the length here, and that's pretty much engagement of the very fancy preparation for pretty challenging arm balance like Ashtavakrasana 8-limb pose. We can obviously play with different sides. So let's do it one more time so you can get better understanding of it. So the left foot is going on the floor just for a second. So the top foot is going fully flat on the ground. We're gonna lift the bottom leg, hook it behind, hook the ankle behind, look for extension, and look for that active engagement and squeeze in the legs, in the shins, inner thighs, in the glutes, and obviously length in the belly. Maybe just one breath in here. And again, you can find your way to very weird down dog with the ankles crossed. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, VASISTHASANA is a transitional pose. So let's play with those transitions now. Okay, so the first transition is pretty easy. We're gonna go into the regular side plank, very common, right? The inner arches are pressing down. We're gonna do the nice extension here. That baby cobra is gonna be very helpful in this one because we wanna find that stretch in the belly, and then start lifting the top leg slightly up. Bend the knee, and then just flip the foot all the way back. Now, as the foot goes down to the floor, obviously on the toes, you're gonna try to spin that top leg out, so you're opening the top hip, and you're looking for it to be more like a back bend. So baby cobra, and a bit of extra stretch in here. From that, we're gonna reverse it by bringing the top hip, stacking it on top of the bottom one. So you're getting into that square motion, reversing everything up, lift the foot, flex it, come back into the side plank. So that's pretty much the easiest way to get that. Let's play around with it a bit more advanced version if you're ready for it. So again, we're gonna start from the side plank. We're gonna lift the top leg. We're gonna bend the knee, open that hip before we start bringing the foot down to the floor. And we're gonna, as slow as you can with control, lower the leg down to the floor, or actually foot down to the floor to toes. At the same time, keeping the top hip lifted. So both glutes engaged, both hips pretty active. Now coming back, we're gonna lift the foot, lift the knee, reverse the action, and come back to side plank. Okay, so coming forward is not as easy as going backwards, but it's still doable, right? I'm gonna show you a bit easier variation and a bit more challenging variation. You can play with both and see which one you are ready to incorporate in your own practice. So let's start with the supportive side plank. We pretty much here, we pretty much where you want to get. Most likely from stepping forward from the side plank, we're going to be leading into one of the balancing poses, probably warrior one, warrior two, depends on the classes, depends on the teacher's sequence. So let's kind of lead into that warrior two variation. So the right leg, my top leg is already forward. I'm just gonna start tippy-toeing the foot forward. As the foot steps forward, it's gonna allow for my back foot to start spinning on the toes. This way I can readjust my hips and spin the back foot. So I'm pretty much here in a standing, either warrior one or warrior two or side angle variation, right? Whichever standing pose you want to incorporate into the practice. From here, reversing is pretty easy as well. So we're starting actually from the back leg. We're gonna start lifting back heel off the floor, start spinning to the outside edge of the back foot. And that in itself is gonna allow us to slide the top leg a bit more to the side, going to that supported side plank. Okay. Okay, let's try a little bit more challenging version. So we're gonna go into regular plank again, regular feet together, inner arches pressing. And we're gonna start lifting the top leg, bending the knee. So it's pretty much the same thing, the same starting point as going backwards to flip dog. But this time we're gonna try to squeeze the knee towards the chest. So we're hugging the thigh of the top leg towards the belly. Sometimes it's easier to bring the hand underneath the knee and just hug that leg even more. Sometimes bringing the hand behind the knee helps. So you have to choose which one is best. And then from here again, the same leg is gonna try to step forward. You can tippy-toe the foot forward, and again, you're gonna start spinning your back foot either on the toes or back, going either to warrior one, two, side plank, right? Right hand comes back to the floor in my case. So I'm gonna reverse it again, starting from the back foot, spinning on the outside edge, squeezing the glutes, so the action of the hips hugging in is very essential in here. And then either hand is grabbing underneath the knee or forward, or maybe bring the hand on the lower back, tippy-toe the foot to the side, or right away from here, start lifting the foot, hug it in, and come back into the side plank. Okay, so coming forward is not as easy as going backwards, but it's still doable, right? I'm gonna show you a bit easier variation and a bit more challenging variation. You can play with both and see which one you are ready to incorporate in your own practice. So let's start with the supportive side plank. We pretty much here, we pretty much where you want to get. Most likely from stepping forward from the side plank, we're going to be leading into one of the balancing poses, probably warrior one, warrior two, depends on the classes, depends on the teacher's sequence. So let's kind of lead into that warrior two variation. So the right leg, my top leg is already forward. I'm just gonna start tippy-toeing the foot forward. As the foot steps forward, it's gonna allow for my back foot to start spinning on the toes. This way I can readjust my hips and spin the back foot. So I'm pretty much here in a standing, either warrior one or warrior two or side angle variation, right? Whichever standing pose you want to incorporate into the practice. From here, reversing is pretty easy as well. So we're starting actually from the back leg. We're gonna start lifting back heel off the floor, start spinning to the outside edge of the back foot. And that in itself is gonna allow us to slide the top leg a little bit more to the side, going to that supported side plank. Okay. Okay, let's try a little bit more challenging version. So we're gonna go into regular plank again, regular feet together, inner arches pressing. And we're gonna start lifting the top leg, bending the knee. So it's pretty much the same thing, the same starting point as going backwards to flip dog. But this time we're gonna try to squeeze the knee towards the chest. So we're hugging the thigh of the top leg towards the belly. Sometimes it's easier to bring the hand underneath the knee and just hug that leg even more. Sometimes bringing the hand behind the knee helps. So you have to choose which one is best. And then from here again, the same leg is gonna try to step forward. You can tippy-toe the foot forward, and again, you're gonna start spinning your back foot either on the toes or back, going either to warrior one, two, side plank, right? Right hand comes back to the floor in my case. So I'm gonna reverse it again, starting from the back foot, spinning on the outside edge, squeezing the glutes. So the action of the hips hugging in is very essential in here. And then either hand is grabbing underneath the knee or forward, or maybe bring the hand on the lower back, tippy-toe the foot to the side, or right away from here, start lifting the foot, hug it in, and come back into the side plank. Now, when any of the above variations was challenging enough for you, there's another variation. It's pretty challenging, but it's pretty fun, of going straight from VASISTHASANA to holding the big toe, kind of like Utthita Hasta Pangusthasana, which is extended big toe pose, and stepping the foot forward. So let's play it. So we're gonna come into the, again, side plank, bend the knee first, hook the big toe, try to extend the leg forward from the flexion, so make sure you're really extending from the heel. You can go up first, trying to get into more extra stretch here, and then from there, again, you're looking for that hugging motion of the thigh towards the belly as you're bringing the foot forward. This time you wanna challenge yourself by keeping the top foot still off the floor as you're spinning the back foot on the toes, and then bring the front heel down to the floor. Release the foot. You may have to adjust the back leg because the stance may be a little bit wider here. And again, you're pretty much in warrior one, warrior two, or side plank. With reversing, hand goes down to the floor. The same action. You're gonna hook the big toe and you're gonna start from the back leg. So the back foot starts spinning to the outside edge. You're gonna squeeze your hips in, engage your glutes. Hug the thigh towards the belly. That action here is very essential. Start lifting the leg and then open up. And then from there, obviously, you can go straight to the flipping back. So many fun variations here. Okay, to cap up all what you've learned today, let's remember just a few essential things about side plank. Side plank is not arm balance, so don't put too much attention and energy into the shoulder and arm. Remember, the core is not just the front muscle, but also the side muscles, especially in this pose, and the lower back muscles. So don't sway your back. Remember, for looking for a little bit of baby cobra in any variation of side plank, and just make sure to have fun, enjoy it, and see you on the mat soon.